Let's talk about True Peak for a second. Who are the mixers that you like? Are they guys like Andy Wallace, Bob Clearmountain, Brendan O'Brien? These are my favorite mixers, and they're ones that occupy all the references when it comes to who mixed what. Rich Costi. All these guys did not care at all about True Peak. So as a result, if what they claim to be the case is true, which is if you have a True Peak that exceeds 0, when everything gets converted from analog to digital, and digital to analog, and back, all this, to get it for streaming purposes, it's going to sound bad, right? That's the logic that they throw at you. Why is it that the stuff mixed by these guys I just mentioned, in which analog gear was used and not one iota of thought was ever considered when it comes to True Peak? Nobody gave a toot. Nobody's looking at a True Peak meter for mixing any of this stuff. Why is it that all that stuff on Spotify sounds fine? If the conversion from the analog medium that it was on to digital streaming creates a problem, and when you play it back, it should be a problem, right? Because the conversion is why that, the True Peak has got to be below 0, and it's got to be a lot below 0, and all this stuff they tell you in the rules for these services we shouldn't even be listening to, in my opinion, like Spotify. If that's what the rules are on all these platforms for what you should put on there, consider why they're there. If when you turn loudness normalization off and you listen to mixes by any of those guys in the eras that nobody cared about True Peak, and you think to yourself, these sound great, I don't hear anything negative, I don't hear anything wrong with these mixes, they sound great, I don't hear clipping, I don't hear digital distortion, I don't hear anything weird happening, it sounds right to me, just like I remember the CD sounding, or there's no negatives happening because of streaming on this stuff. Well, if that's the case, why is it that everyone else needs to abide by this -1 nonsense theory or whatever, that True Peak shouldn't exceed -1? I'll tell you why they put that there, if you ask me. They put that there because they know that their service is set up for people that are not professionals to make music and put it on there. It's set up for anybody to do, which means professionals and non-professionals alike, but the difference is the professionals aren't reading the rules. The professionals are putting up stuff the way they've always done it, which is they make a great mix and then they put it up. They release it, and part of releasing it, it goes to streaming, but they're not making another mix with the True Peaks lowered. I want to show you something in a session, all right? This is helpful for anyone who really wants to, doubt this at all. You should consider a few things. These are references. Now, if you use a loopback function and you turn loudness normalization off before you do any of this, it'll show you how loud things really are. There used to be a website up that you could actually check this stuff, but now you have to kind of do it the DIY way. This is Wide Awake by Audioslave, mixed by Brendan O'Brien, one of our favorites, right? I double-click this, analyze. -6.1 LUFS, True Peak 0.9. So that this exceeds 0, and guess what? It sounds great. This is Nothing Left to Say Goodbye on the same album, Revelations, Brendan O'Brien. Analyze, -7.5 LUFS, True Peak 0.9. So we got plenty of options here. This is Everybody's Gotta Learn Sometime, a song by Beck that I love. So I have a lot of different references for different styles of music, and I pick the one that closest lines up to what I'm doing if I ever do decide to use a reference. This is also one of my favorite songs. I really love this song. It's from the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind soundtrack, and I'm not sure he ever released it on his own album, but it's one of my favorite songs. True Peak 0.2 and a -12.2 LUFS situation. Now, this song is very chill. If you're asking why I don't play them, because I'm not looking to get strikes and demonetized and yada yada, so I ain't going to play this stuff. But because that's a guarantee that that's going to happen. And if it happens to Rick Beato and they don't even want him playing stuff, they don't want anybody playing stuff. And if, not taking that risk, he hires a lawyer full time to deal with all this stuff. So the point is, this is a chill song. This isn't even dense. The drummer's probably playing like this, just tapping, light. Great song. Check it out if you haven't. But the point is, this song, low on the luffs, and it's over true peak. So, and now I want you to notice something else. Notice how this looks. Look at how the waveform looks. Sometimes observing waveforms is super interesting, right? The right side, very different than the left side of this mix. That's interesting. But also the spikes on it. Look at the spikes, man. Like the top of this waveform. It has some life to it. It's not totally square. Whereas when you look at this Chili Peppers song, this is a remastered version. This is Brendan O'Brien's mix, but this was remastered to be what people are used to today for some ridiculous reason. The same song, by the way, exists over here in one of these waveforms, but these are all the original mixes. And look at the waveforms. They're the original mixes that were mastered, but they're not mastered, recently. Whereas this is the re-release, recent, remaster stuff. This is not. Look at the difference in the waveforms. That's why these mixes have life. And this one does not. But it's loud. It's competitive with playlists from one to the next. All the stuff you shouldn't care about. Unless you're dealing with very specific genre stuff and you're thinking a DJ who's got the talent to be a DJ is also not going to volume match the stuff, so there's not a drop in volume. If you're worried about that, which I'm not, and I don't think along those lines, I make the mix sound as great as I can. I don't sacrifice the quality for volume, but I had to get there. I wasn't always somebody who thought this way. So if you don't think that way, that's fine, but this is what your stuff will look like. And then when you analyze it, true peak 1.9. You want to talk about over zero? That is a lot over zero. Negative 5.8 luffs. There's no reason for these songs to be that loud. No reason at all. And, I think this one's Give It Away. I don't want to play it, but this one's Give It Away. The other one was Blood Sugar that I just did. I'm not Blood Sugar, Under the Bridge. So 1.3 true peak on Give It Away. Okay? And then this other one over here. But then I put the real one after it. And the real one is substantially lower. It's like crazy lower. The true peak's still over zero, but it's negative 15 luffs. And there's lots of room in it. So, I just find this stuff so interesting. And I find it's very helpful when you're getting scared of true peaking over zero. Like, do you realize... And you can probably find it if he hasn't taken it down. I don't believe he did. But Mixbus TV, our friend David, the dude's got, and I say our friend because I'm hoping one day I'm actually friends with the dude. I'm not friends with him at the moment, but he's somebody who's very helpful for the community, so he feels like a friend to me. But anyway, David he made a video on this kind of thing when there was another website up that allowed you to actually listened, like, that had songs up there that were all over the charts, and it was years ago, and they've since taken that down. But you got to see stuff like tons of major pop records and rock records that are sitting with true peaks over zero. Tons of them. So why is it that works or doesn't? This is what it comes down to. If what the actual true peak problem is winds up being something like a transient of a drum, you'll never really be able to hear that as a problem most of the time. Not always, most of the time. And as a result, when you're mixing it and you have something sitting there, or you send it to be mastered and then you listen back, if there's nothing that sounds crazy to you, it's going to be fine. What I'll often do is upload a song to YouTube, even if you keep it private, listen to what it sounds like once it goes through the processing to be able to be streamed. And that YouTube sound, if that doesn't sound clipped or digitally distorted, if there's nothing wrong with it there, it's going to be fine later. So that's how I look at it, is like, stop being so scared of these numbers. Stop turning on the true peak limit thing. Like, just every time I use a brick wall limiter, it sounds so much worse to me than when I just run through the hybrid gear and I hit the converter, which is, a Burl converter. When I hit it kind of hard, it does its own thing where it just maintains, the sound of the majority of the mix, and the peaks that go above a certain point get held down by the converter. Just like if you drive into any converter, there's a ceiling you will hit. But it doesn't sound the same as using a brick wall limiter. A brick wall limiter, it doesn't exist in the analog world, first of all, because it's just inherent in the nature of the way analog designs for the circuits are built. It doesn't have look ahead. It's not doing that. It's not chopping off the thing, as it's happening and totally squaring it. So it's just, the MBP, the Rupert Neve Designs MBP, has a limiter on it, but it's not a brick wall limiter. But it's the closest thing I've ever used to a brick wall limiter, because it's very fast. But because it's in the analog world and it's not a brick wall limiter, it doesn't sound anything like a brick wall limiter. So the way I think about this is, when I'm hitting things super hard in the analog world, I'd like to not process it with a brick wall limiter afterwards, because at this point in my life, for some reason, I am able to hear all the negative effects of what those brick wall limiters are doing, and I haven't found one yet that I like. And I've tried a bunch of them. I just have not found one that sounds okay to me. The only thing I've found that kind of competes with what I can get in the hybrid world in the box, the only thing is if I use gold clip kind of as the limiter last, and if I have it set in a way that's kind of gentle, it doesn't give me that limiter sound I hate, that brick wall limiter sound I don't like. It doesn't do that. And that's something that I found is the only way I can get close to, the hybrid workflow in the box, is really by using that last. But there's just one other thing I want to end with before I get out of here. This concept of true peak being important, the guys that believe this is super important are probably ones that have been burned by this in the past, because they'll always lead with, I've heard digital distortion, I've heard this, that. So what I want to say is, I'm sure there are some circumstances where it's not something as quick as a snare transient or a kick transient, or something super quick where a little bit of true peak over zero, even if it caused a smidgen of distortion or anything, if it's not super quick like that, you might hear it on a vocal or whatever else is going to be super loud in your mix, depending on the genre, what kind of mix you're making. Maybe there's no vocals, but it's some sort of instrument that's, very constant, like a keyboard or something, and that's true peaking over zero. Or if there's something like that going on, I don't doubt that you may be able to hear it and it will sound bad. So nothing I'm saying is in an isolated vacuum. It's all based on, does it sound okay, or do you hear a problem? And if you don't hear a problem, don't assume that you will hear a problem once it's uploaded onto these servers and these sites and these streaming platforms and digital distribution. Don't assume that. Because as you could see, if all these pros have all these records that sound amazing, that so many of us use for references because of how great they sound, and they're all over zero true peaking, then you can do the same. As long as it sounds great before it gets there, it's going to sound great after. I'm going to venture to say that anything that you've heard, digital distortion, clipping, whatever you're calling that, because of the true peak, if that was the reason, I bet you that stuff was noticeable before you put it on those services. Most likely that's the case. So trust your ears, trust what you're listening to, and maybe you'll be able to do what you have to leave life in the mix and not put a limiter on it with a true peak thing, keeping it down, flat topping everything, and giving it that weird unnatural sound. Because there's a big difference between a mix with that and without it. And the best way to tell is to make a mix without it. And even go the far extreme on this. Try to make a mix with no compression at all and no limiting at all, none of it. Then add one, just a mix bus compressor. Then, if you have to add something else, add a mix bus compressor and a limiter. Now, you could put EQs in there too on the mix bus or wideners or whatever you like. All of it is fine. But what I'm saying is, to hear how bad the stuff is messing you up, there's an art to doing nothing. There's an art to doing less. And once you hear it without it, you'll realize, I think, that a lot of what you're chasing is putting that stuff on and mixing into it. Somebody wrote a great comment he was a mastering engineer. If I could find it, I'll throw it up right now. But he was a mastering engineer talking about how the biggest problem a lot of people have is they mix into limiters, and these things add these inherent weird sounding artifacts and stuff to the mix, and it makes the mix sort of sterile out the gate. And also, you never really know what you should do in the mix because that limiter is doing so much. And I know plenty of guys who mix into limiters, but I could tell you that I did it for years also. And what I've noticed is my mixes got substantially better in terms of the punch, the clarity, all that. As soon as I took that off, the balance was way better. And if I did add it, if I added it after, everything was great. It always sounded way better. I had way more control over what I was doing and what it sounded like in the end. And in doing things that way, I realized, what I told you about the gold clip factor, the fact that just adding that instead of a brick wall limiter was way better to me. And the only reason I even know that is because I was comparing it with the gear. And once I used the hybrid workflow and I was so happy with the way things were sounding, the last thing I was going to do was put any more plugins on in the box. And I know a lot of guys do that too. They mix through their hybrid stuff and then they put more stuff on the mix bus in the box. But what I found is the less I do, the better. That's the art to doing nothing or doing less. That's really what I mean by doing nothing. Doing way less than you think you need. So I'm not going to ruin something that sounded so organic and alive by putting on something in the box like a limiter to then crank up the volume a few dB because I need to compete with some ridiculous playlist or something. The first thing you should realize is that anybody who's acting like a follower in terms of they're going to ruin their audio, they're going to ruin the thing they're working on in order to make it compete with some other guy's stuff who ruined his thing because he was making it compete. It's just this dominoes of stuff that sounds terrible. That's where we're at. If all the people are thinking they need to compete, it needs to sound similar because people are going to check between the songs. So you're making a bad decision based on other guys' bad decisions. Just lemmings jumping off a hill, freaking mountain. What are you doing? Oh, they jumped off the waterfall. I got to go do it too. It's crazy to me. I just feel like only make decisions based on your song and what you think sounds better or worse. Never base the loudness you think you need to make your song on something else. That's got nothing to do with your song. The whole thing about it is probably different instrumentation recorded on different stuff. The arrangement's totally different. The freaking way it sounds is totally different. The tempo's different. The people in it are different. The dynamic range of all the instruments is different. Everything's different. Yet you think you need to match the volume so that the time it gets played next to something else, it sounds just as good. I'm telling you, the volume knob today is a click away and less than a foot away from everyone. It's in their pocket while they're standing up, or it's even closer. It's on their headphone thing when they're listening to headphones. It's everywhere, the volume thing. And I don't even know if on AirPod things they got a volume on it, but they probably do. I don't know. I don't have AirPods. I never use them. I still use wired headphones. So, I got the Focal Classic Spirit Pros right here. These things are discontinued and they sound awesome for me to check mixes on and stuff. And I combine those with the Audizies and I'm okay. But again, it's a different thing. What we're talking about. I'm saying everybody who's playing through a Bluetooth or whatever can literally just yell the name if it's voice activated and tell it to make it louder. It's so easy to make things louder that's the last thing you should be thinking about is ruining your song to compete with somebody else. It's crazy to me. So if I could get anybody, even one guy, to abandon that trend of doing that, I think I've done my job because My stuff sounds way better when I care so much less about volume and more about, am I hurting the song by adding this freaking limiter and this other thing to make it louder and keep doing that? Because I think I am. And I think that's the answer to pain in music listening today. So anyway, you guys are awesome. Questions, comments, answers, throw it in there. I appreciate it. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. I hope you dug it. You guys got this. Take it easy.